Prices on computer parts, especially graphics cards, have finally been getting better with all sorts of supply chain issues getting better, crypto demand decreasing, all of that. The point is, this is one of the best times we've had in over a year and a half to build a PC. And for a lot of people, 1440p is the sweet spot in between 1080p and 4K in terms of image quality and performance. Now, in this video, I'm going to show you how you could build a very solid 1440p gaming PC targeting a $1,000 budget, but then I'll also show you how you could increase that budget in order to increase your performance and longevity, all of that, what sort of trade-offs you make when you cut down to the $1,000 price point. Anyway, I think a great place to start a PC build is in PC Part Picker. I'm not sponsored by them in any way. I just think this is a fantastic tool. Let me get out of your way a little bit. And so when you're planning the PC build, one thing I love here is that this is going to visually demonstrate the main parts that you want to consider. Now, I'm not going to factor in the price of the operating system because a lot of people may already have access to a Windows license, and there's a lot of debates on whether or not you should use gray market sites, all of that. By the way, I turned down so much sponsorship money on all of those gray market CD key sites, just so you guys know. Anyway, I could be making a lot of sponsorship deals there. Anyway, so the most important thing when you're targeting a PC build is knowing what you're going to use the PC build for. So in this video, I'm targeting gaming. And so gaming at 1440p, the graphics card is by far the most important component. And so here's the thing. This is also going to be the most expensive component. And while the prices have gotten a lot better, they're still not amazing. Now, from the NVIDIA side, I think that the lowest card that makes sense for a very solid, now I'm searching, by the way, I'm searching for the card I'm looking for, and then I'm going to sort price low to high. And what I'm looking for here is the 3060 Ti, because this actually has significantly better performance than the baseline 3060, but it doesn't cost as much as the 3070, except, well, in the current market, it actually costs about what the 3070's MSRP should be. But the 3070's, well, let's double check. If we could happen to get a 3070 for MSRP, which I know we won't, it's another like $80 it looks like right now if we wanted to get a 3070. The 3060 Ti gets most of the performance of a 3070, but again costs less. If it was actually available at its MSRP of $400, this would be by far the best price to performance card of this graphics card generation, but it doesn't cost its MSRP. Anyway, $500 is actually less than it usually is. I was expecting to see it more around the $550 mark, which is where it usually hangs out. So this is actually a particularly good deal right now. Now, if you can't find one at this price, you should check into the competitor from AMD, the RX 6700 XT. Now, the 6700 XT generally does cost its MSRP of $480 on a regular basis, and it will perform a little bit better than a 3060 Ti in most games as long as you're not using ray tracing. Once you factor in ray tracing, the 3060 Ti will have far better performance, although whether or not you'll really use ray tracing at this performance tier is a bit of a hit or a miss. Also, the 6700 XT has an extra 50% of VRAM. It has 12 gigabytes instead of 8 gigabytes, although currently, there's very few situations where the 8 gigabytes becomes a limiting factor. We've seen in the history of graphics cards, having more VRAM is always a good thing for longevity. The main things that the 3060 Ti have going for it are, like I said, ray tracing performance. Also, DLSS currently has better support than FSR 2.0. And FSR 2.0 still doesn't look quite as good as DLSS, so those are definitely some advantages. If they're at about the same price here, I think I'm going to select the 3060 Ti for this build. It's also, you know, the NVIDIA encoder is a little bit better for streaming. There's a lot of professional applications that are coded in a way that they better support NVIDIA hardware. However, if you're don't care that much about ray tracing, streaming, or you know, certain professional applications, that extra 4 gigabytes of VRAM from AMD on the 6700 XT also makes a lot of sense. I think both of those choices are correct, and it really depends a little bit on personal preference. Also, like I said, you're usually not going to find the 3060 Ti for this price from what I've seen recently. So if it starts to go up to $550 or more, I would definitely grab the 6700 XT instead. But if they're at the same price here, I think I'm going to grab the 3060 Ti. This is the most important part of your video card, of your gaming PC build. Now, also, I think this is kind of we could do better here, and I'll show you that when we look at an increased price point. But at this price point, I think the 3060 Ti makes a lot of sense here. Okay, the next most important choice for a gaming PC is the CPU. The CPU needs to be able to feed the GPU, and if it can't keep up with the GPU, then you will become CPU bottlenecked. Your performance of your graphics card won't be able to reach its potential because the CPU can't keep up. So I think right now the best value choices on this are the 12400F from Intel, which is currently available at $170. If you're wondering what's the difference between the F and the non-F version of this, the F means it does not have an integrated graphics chip, which means that your PC could not have any display output at all if your RTX 3060 Ti or whatever other graphics card you're buying was having issues or you didn't have it anymore. So a lot of people feel like it's worth spending a little bit extra money to get that, but when I'm focusing on value here, I'm going to rein in the budget and just say, we don't need that, we have a graphics card, although having that is sometimes nice. Now, if you want to go with the AMD route, the 5600 non-X version is a good price competitor. Now, you might wonder about the 5600G. The G means it has graphics, but this actually performs significantly worse and has some other trade-offs compared to the 5600 or the 5600X. So I would not recommend that one unless you're going for a not having a graphics card at all and you want that integrated graphics there. The Ryzen 5 5600 is a good choice. At $180, it performs very similarly to the 12400. And sometimes the motherboards can be a bit cheaper. You could really go either way here. I'm going to go with the Intel chip for this build, but I think both choices are correct. Just like I said, you could have gone with the 6700 XT here from AMD. Now, I'm going to go with the stock cooler. This comes with a stock cooler that will absolutely get the full performance out of this CPU. You might have some trade-offs in terms of running at a bit higher temps or a bit noisier, but the stock fans on the 12400F have reviewed at being fine. They get the job done, and paying more on a CPU cooler is something you could do in the future if you needed to. Now, the motherboard needs to be able to run the CPU, and one nice thing about PC Part Picker is once you've selected your CPU, if you just sort price low to high, it's only going to show you compatible motherboards. Not that it's a bad idea to double check it yourself, but it will only show you compatible motherboards. Now, the H610 chipset has some downsides, although it does support the motherboard. The B660 chipset has fewer trade-offs. Now, this particular model, the MSI Pro M-G, is not as good as the one that a lot of you probably think this is, which is the MSI Pro, where is it, B660 M-A. That one is going to have better VRMs, which basically would help if you were trying to put in a better CPU in the future. The 12400F, though, should get pretty much its full performance out of the B660MG, and it's going to save us a significant amount of money. But I do think, again, another place you could spend more is on a motherboard with better VRMs here. But it's not going to really make a big impact in our gaming performance on the 12400F. So I'm going to go ahead and save that money here. You might feel differently, and feel free to, like I said, go with the A version of this board, which will have better VRMs. Okay, memory and storage. So I still think that you can get by with 16 gigabytes of memory in the vast majority of games. There are very few games that benefit from going up to 32 gigabytes of memory, although there are games out there that do, and I don't think it's a bad idea to get more memory. But in terms of, I'm trying to show you the lowest price solid 1440p build before increasing the budget in the future. So notice the speeds here. You want to think about speeds and you want to think about the cast latency when selecting RAM. Although these will only really affect your gaming very much when you run into a CPU limited situation. That might happen more often if you're playing like esports titles at low settings rather than playing heavily graphically demanding single player titles. Now, if it's only a little bit more money to go up to 3200 on the speed, you should do it, although a cast latency of 22 is very bad. I would generally say that 3200 at a cast latency of 16 for only a few more dollars is worth the upgrade. Although it looks like we'd have to then go significantly more money to get anything much better than that. I'm scrolling down pretty far and not seeing things significantly better. We go up to like 3600, but CL18, which debatably because you have worse cast latency. I guess what I'm getting at here is I think on a budget system, if we're not specifically targeting CPU-limited esports performance, I think that the 3200 CL16 is good enough. And so we're going to go ahead and use that. Once again, increasing the memory capacity to 32 gigabytes or increasing the speeds if you're focusing on esports could be worthwhile. Now, storage-wise, if we were really cutting corners, we could go down to 500 gigabytes, but personally, I wouldn't really want to buy a system with less than a terabyte of storage space when we're talking about modern game install sizes. So I'm sorting price low to high. I'm also not going to get a hard drive. You could add one in later if you just want a lot of file storage. Personally, I'd still use an SSD for that, but that's personal preference. But for your operating system install and the main games that you play, you should absolutely get an SSD. Now, not all SSDs are created equal. You don't need the most blazing fast one, but I'll tell you that like the Team Group MP33 is very slow when compared to like the Silicon Power A60 here for only a few dollars more. So for just a few dollars more, I'm going to grab this one. Although, again, even for a Gen 3 SSD, this one is still kind of a middle-of-the-road one. But I think in actual gaming, this one's going to be fast enough that you'd be hard-pressed to notice the differences, although when I show you where you could increase your budget, well, I will look at getting a faster Gen 4 drive and even 2 terabytes. But now, what we're basically looking at here is a very solid build, but what we need is a case to put it in, and we need a power supply that can, power the system. Now, I am not a case expert, but here's what I will say. If you want to go the budget case route, so you can just go cases, price low to high, you want to look out for a couple of things to not completely screw yourself over. One thing is, make sure it's not a micro mini tower or like ITX tower when what you're looking for is a normal size build and you want to worry about whether your parts will actually fit inside of it. Most mid-tower cases are probably going to be okay for the components that we're looking at here. If you're getting some gigantic graphics cards or huge coolers, you'll want to be more careful to make sure that they will actually fit. The other thing is, a lot of these cheap cases won't come with fans, and then you'd have to spend money on fans, and then that means it's going to be priced as high as possibly a better case that would have already come with the fans. And case manufacturers can get bulk deals on fans, so they can probably get you fans cheaper than you could. Now, glancing through here, I'm noticing that a few of these, like this one, seems to have some fans on it. It has some kind of reasonable reviews, and I believe this being labeled as air, let's double check. It looks like it has a mesh front, which will help with airflow, and this is fairly cheap. Now, I've glanced at this before, and some of them say that the fans can be a little bit noisy here. They have an annoying noise. Also, it looks like these fans are not RGB. These are just going to stay at this color, and they look blue in the picture, although some of the reviews said that they were actually white. So here's the thing. You could absolutely spend more on your case, but that's a personal preference. This case will fit the parts. It has reasonable airflow and comes with fans. You can certainly spend more if you would like fans that maybe are less noisy, better, have addressable RGB, a better quality build. But for the price, and I think I'm just going to throw this one in here to fit our budget. Okay, now power supply wise, a graphics card will generally come with a power supply recommendation, which is usually, honestly, even a little bit overkill if you're buying a good power supply and a modest CPU. So I think that for a 3060 Ti, we're going to be absolutely fine if we search for something that's maybe in the, 650 watts is probably more than enough for this build. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to filter for that. Also, I want a good quality one. So I'm going to search for 80 plus gold. Now, 80 plus gold, be careful on this. This is an efficiency rating, not a quality rating. So it's not a guarantee that your PC isn't going to explode just because you have 80 plus gold. So there's certainly ranges of quality within this. So I would also look for a solid brand, a well-known brand name. And you can also look at the user reviews and try to get a 5-star unit. So you might also think about whether it's modular. So fully modular means that the cables can be disconnected from the power supply, which can help you with cable management if you don't need all of the cables. Some GPUs are semi-modular, meaning most of the cables come off, but not all of them. And then some of them are not modular at all. Now, I'm noticing the Supernova GA is a decent, not top of the line, but this is a decent EVGA power supply, 80 plus gold, fully modular. I think that this one will be fine, and it's only $60, and that fits our $1,000 build price. So check this out right there. We have for $1,000 a very solid 1440p gaming PC, or this could be used for high refresh rate 1080p gaming. And I think that you could be very happy with this. Keep in mind all of the trade-offs I mentioned as we selected the parts. Now, if you want to get better performance, the number one thing that you would want to upgrade here is the graphics card. The 3060 Ti is going to do well at 1440p, but not necessarily max out the settings at every game on the more graphically demanding titles. And if you want high refresh rates, you will be turning down settings and or using DLSS. Although by going the NVIDIA route here, it is really nice to have the DLSS option, which looks pretty good at 1440p. It's not free performance. In most games, you do see more ghosting, a little bit more aliasing, a little bit of blurriness in motion, but it does look pretty solid. But if we're going to step up our PC, the next step would be the graphics card. So the next step up from a 3060 Ti is an RTX 3070, but you're going to see that it is a lot more money. If we go to Tech Power Up, I really like this this website. They have a GPU database here that is incredibly useful because you can click on a GPU like the RTX 3060 Ti, and then you can go to their relative performance chart, which I found compared to a lot of the other GPU comparisons you find online, this one both has more data, is easier to use, and seems to be pretty accurate. Now, individual games and graphics cards aren't necessarily gonna perfectly line up with this, but what you can actually see here is the performance difference. So I would want, if we're going to spend more money on the GPU, to be getting significantly more performance. According to this particular comparison, which it'll vary game by game, the RTX 3070 would be gaining us 17% more performance compared to the 3060 Ti, which isn't absolutely huge. So I'd want something a little bit more meaningful than that. The 3070 Ti is a 25% gain, but one issue with the 3070 Ti is that it still only has 8 gigabytes of VRAM, which when you're spending as much money as these cost, now let's check what they cost here. We're looking at $675. That's a lot of money to spend right now if you're really just getting, I'd like to have more VRAM at that price. So the AMD competitor here, the RX 6800, is getting even more performance and would have 16 gigabytes of VRAM. We could go ahead and price check that right now. And so the 6800 non-XT is at $700 right now. So that's pretty close in price to that 3070 Ti. I'd say the main disadvantage here would be losing access to DLSS, and it won't have as good of ray tracing support either. Now, $700, the XT model actually has significantly more performance, and now we're up to $770. And that's now on almost 50% increase in performance, so that might be kind of worth it. Now, the RTX 3080 will still get you DLSS and much better ray tracing performance. Ray tracing at 1440p on the RTX 3080 is very, very doable. So if the 6800 to 6800 XT is getting up into this price point, you know, let's check in on the RTX 3080. Because the prices have been coming down on these. It looks like the cheapest models are coming in close to the price of a 6800 XT. And so at the same price, I do think I'd recommend this over that. Now, this is only the 10 gigabyte model. I personally much prefer the 12 gigabyte model, but it looks like today that would cost us an extra $100. And I think if we're targeting 1440p, 10 gigabytes realistically is fine here. And that helps the ray tracing performance as well, because ray tracing will use more VRAM. So if we slot that in, this suddenly becomes a $1,300 build, but we're also going to run into a problem. A 650 watt power supply is going to struggle with an RTX 3080. So I think that we're going to want to bump up our power supply as well. So this time, I'm going to go ahead and let's see if we can find a good 850 watt power supply. You do not want to skimp on your power supply when you're going for an RTX 3080. They draw significant amounts of power, and they can have high transient peaks where even on an 850 watt power supply, but not a very good one, you can sometimes trigger some issues where the PC will reset because it's temporarily a little bit out of power. So I don't want to cheap out on this at all. The Supernova GA model would probably do okay, although I did hear some people complaining about some transient peaks on that. Ooh, now the Superflower LEDX3 is actually the power supply I have, and $110 for that level of performance is quite good. I think I'm going to go ahead and select that for today's build. And I think that this can power pretty much any GPU in the current generation. Although next gen, we're looking at the top end GPUs might be kind of insane, and you know, if you were doing like a 3090 Ti, you might want to overkill it even past this. But anyway, so that brings up to 1350. So this made a huge jump, but this is going to deliver crazy good performance at 1440p. The RTX 3080 is going to just crush 1440p, especially if you're willing to use a little bit of DLSS. And even with ray tracing, it should get the job done. Okay, so what if you wanted to spend even more? I actually don't recommend spending more on your GPU unless it was to maybe get a 6900 XT or an RTX 3080 12 gigabyte, which would each have their own slight advantages. But really, I think once you're at the 3080 performance level, it starts to be diminishing returns going past that point. Now, at this point, I'll tell you right now that this case feels a little bit stupid. It will get the job done, but you could get a nicer case for quality of life here. Also, I feel like personally, I would probably go up to 32 gigabytes of RAM, and then this will be a very future-proof system. Also, a fast Gen 4 SSD would help out if we start to see direct storage become a meaningful thing. I don't know if it will, but it could help out. And that is a thing that's coming in. So I think the next thing that I'm actually going to recommend here is going up to 32 gigabytes of RAM and maybe even increasing the SSD. And I'm actually going to show you guys a deal here. I just posted this on my community page as of the time of filming, but Team Group, and this is where the limitation of PC Part Picker comes in. it doesn't find cool bundle deals that you can find if you look separately. And I like to find these and post them on my community page. I just found a 32 gigabyte of RAM deal. Now this is the 3200 speed and 16 CAS latency. So it's the same speed of RAM, but double the capacity. And it's coming with a 2 terabyte Gen 4 SSD with read speeds up to 5,000 megabytes per second. So this isn't the fastest Gen 4 SSD, but this is several times faster than the 1 terabyte Gen 3 SSD that we had originally. And when you bundle these, plus it has a coupon code, this is actually going to come down to $251 for that doubling of both our RAM and SSD capacity and more than doubling the SSD speed and getting us access to that direct storage support with the Gen 4 NVMe drive. That could end up being a cool thing in the future. We have kind of yet to see, but it helps us with that future-proofing a little bit. So keep in mind that this price now needs to add $250. So let's bring in our calculator. So this is 1,227. So 1,227 plus 251. Yes, I'm a math teacher. Yes, I could do this in my head, but this is a video and we're doing a visual comparison. So that would bring you up to about under $1,500. So what if you wanted to spend a little bit more for some of these quality of life type things? Well, this is the point where you might go several different routes. One route could be getting a better case. Personally, I'm a fan of Fantex cases, so I'm going to check what the prices are on those right now. Sometimes you can get a good deal on the P360A or the P300 mesh. The P360A is pretty good. It comes with 2 fans. It doesn't have a rear fan. But overall, I do prefer this case to the other one that we were looking at. It's not too much more money. So I think popping that in there makes a bit of sense. And you could even go higher on that if you wanted to. And I think this is a better case. But like I said, you could go much higher than that. Another thing I think would be on the motherboard, popping into that the A model, the B660MA instead of the B660MG. And this is going to have better VRMs, and this would open you up to a higher end CPU or an upgrade to like a 13th gen high-end CPU in the future if you felt like you needed to. Although that's also the next place you could go here. You could upgrade your CPU, and upgrades to your CPU past this point won't come with a stock cooler, so you would also then need to spend more on the stock cooler. But I'm going to be honest, the 12400F is a fantastic gaming CPU, and so I'm really going to not recommend upgrading that unless you really want to, or you're targeting esports performance, where you might want to actually go with faster memory as well as a faster CPU. But really, this is going to have very solid performance right here. So I think that this has now shored up most of the shortcomings of the build. You could throw a cooler on here if you wanted to. That's the main other thing that's standing out to me. But other than that, we're now in a great shape here. So this is now 1280 plus the memory and storage. This gets us slightly over $1,500, and I think that this is a fantastic gaming PC that would not only crush 1440p, but this could also be a very solid 4K gaming PC with this RTX 3080. So those are my recommendations. Wow, this is a long video. I better just stop talking. I hope all of you have an excellent day.